Government policies for business growth. Every nation defines its mode of governance through a number of policies. These policies are described as public policies. In the national and international parlance, public policies are as old as governments. In the post-Second World War period, a number of transnational companies evolved which started to work in different parts of the world. They align their operations according to the public policies of those nations wherefrom they operate. In fact, all large corporate houses align their corporate policies according to the set government policies of the host nations. Introduction. Policy framework in India. India attained freedom in 1947, with the partition of the nation. Riots and famines broke out in different parts of the nation. The new government of India faced a mammoth developmental challenge. Strong policy making was required as the nation had a diversity of languages, cultures, inequalities. Thus, India was looking for strong policy decisions. Policy in the contemporary global economies. In the contemporary world, the emerging economies like Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa have distinct policies on governance. The socialist and communist states like China, North Korea, the erstwhile Soviet Union used to set highly controlled public policies. To cope with the varied economic problems and demands of the people, every single government has to outline these policies. Meaning of policies. In any nation, policy-making process is related to political actions. When India was a British colony, public freedom was conspicuous by its absence. Tax rules were stringent on Indian traders, whereas a democracy frames liberal policies. In the Indian democracy, we have several political parties. Leaders are free to argue in the parliament. State and the centre have many shared responsibilities. Policy in the contemporary global economies. Liberalization. Liberalization of economic policy refers to the gradual decrease in government command and control over the economic policies. Simplification of tax structure, removing quotas, bars and economic restrictions are some examples of liberalization. Privatization. Privatization, in its purest form, means transfer of government ownership to private hands. In real life, it is done in different forms. In some cases, ownership of all shares is transferred from government to a single highest bidder. Globalization. Globalization refers to taking or restrictions in export and import of goods and services. It also covers the measures of lifting the trade barriers. Public policy. Goal-oriented. Public policies are always goal-oriented. These are formulated and implemented in order to attain certain objectives which the government has in view for the ultimate benefit of the masses in a welfare state. These policies clearly spell out the programs of government. Government's collective actions. Public policy represents the outcome of the government's collective actions. It means that it is a pattern or course of activity or the governmental officials and actors in a collective sense than being as their discrete and segregated decisions. Executive orders, decisions, etc. Public policy is what the government actually decides or chooses to do. It is the relationship of the government units to the specific field of political environment in a given administrative system. It can take a variety of forms like law, ordinances, court decisions, executive orders, decisions, etc. Positive in the sense. Public policy is positive in the sense that it depicts the concern of the government and involves its action to a particular problem on which the policy is made. It has the sanction of law and authority behind it. Components of public policy process. Continuous in nature. Public policy process is continuous in nature. It involves certain distinct components such as problem identification, policy formulation, policy adoption, policy implementation, and policy evaluation. These components are interconnected by various types of communication and a multiplicity of feedback loops. Process of lawmaking. The process of lawmaking in India may be broadly divided into three phases: pre-legislative phase, legislative phase and post-legislative phase. Pre-legislative phase comprises identification of need for a new law or an amendment to an existing legislation. Proposed legislation. The proposed legislation is brought to the Parliament and is referred to the Standing Committee. After the Cabinet approves the bill, it is introduced in the Parliament. On introduction of the bill, the Minister of the concerned department may send notice demonstrating the intention that the bill may be moved, considered and passed. Components of public policy process. House votes on the bill. The House votes on the bill with amendments, if any. If the bill is passed in one House, it is then sent to the other House. Once the bill is passed by both the Houses, a copy of the bill is sent to Legislative Department of Ministry of Law and Justice for scrutiny. Post-scrutiny by the Ministry of Law and Justice, it is presented to the President for assent. Communication and feedbacks. The communication and feedbacks interact in a number of ways. Policy making is a dynamic process. Public policy, in almost all cases, lays down general directives, rather than detailed instructions, on the main lines of action to be followed. Social action. A policy decision-making can result in a social action. The policies of most socially significant decision-making, such as most public policy making, are intended to result in action. Also, policies directed at the policy-making apparatus itself, such as efficiency drives in government, are action-oriented. Nature of public policy. Restrictive policies. Restrictive policies curtail all benefits in some particular issue. For example, custom duties may be imposed to protect Indian products. Regulatory practices. Regulatory practices regulate the activities of a particular sector of economy. The regulator checks deviations in set practices and policies. Reserve Bank of India is a major regulator for banks. RBI also regulates the money market and forex market operations. Facilitating policies. Facilitating policies are the ones which facilitate an activity. The conducive policies towards the development of MSMEs, that is micro small medium enterprises, are an example of facilitating policy. The formation of National Skills Development Corporation is another facilitating policy of Government of India.